A new world order.
The first building hit at high floor by the first plane is in smoke.
On September 11, 2001, American network television relays the U.S. government's immediate finger-pointing at Osama bin Laden and the Afghan Taliban.
We all know perfectly well that the Taliban has been housing and comforting Osama bin Laden.
The Taliban have been warned. The U.S. is going to retaliate against Afghanistan itself.
We will make no distinction between the terrorists who committed these acts and those who harbor them.
Even though the alleged terrorist list doesn't include any Afghans, President Bush consults neither the U.S. Congress nor the United Nations and attacks Afghanistan within a month of September 11th.
Certainly the U.S. has been involved in many acts of indiscriminate bombing and killing and targeting of Afghans, and that has created enormous resentment, especially immediately after the war when they were trying to hunt down bin Laden. There were enormous bombing incidents which I think were completely inappropriate to the target, given that you were aiming to bomb maybe a few Taliban, but you were using these enormous munitions, killing a lot of civilians.
More innocent civilians have died in Afghanistan as a result of high-altitude bombing by the United States Air Force than died in the September 11th attacks in New York. We need to keep these things in mind.
Their war has lasted a decade now and has brought Afghanistan to all but complete ruin. Not only is the nation's infrastructure and economy destroyed, its people too have been rendered little more than collateral. They have been targeted as sport, burnt, raped, arrested, and mistreated.
A year ago yesterday, on November 6, 2012, tens of millions of Americans went to the polls to re-elect President Obama. On that same day, thousands of miles away, a 39-year-old Afghan farmer named Mohammed Qasim disappeared after being arrested by U.S. Special Forces. He was never heard from again. Months later, an Afghan shepherd saw a feral dog digging at human remains now believed to be the farmer's. His decaying body was found just outside a base used by a team of U.S. Special Forces known as the A-Team. The body was found just weeks after U.S. Special Forces were compelled by the Afghan government to leave the base amid allegations of torture and murder. More and more bodies were soon found just outside the base located in Wardak province, west of Kabul. In total, Afghan officials say they have uncovered the bodies of 10 Afghan men, all of whom disappeared after being arrested by U.S. Special Forces.
Many Afghans have experienced firsthand the West's empty rhetoric about human rights and freedom in the prisons of Bagram and Kandahar.
چې ډیر وخت وروسته بیا د خلک په زړه کې بدوالی رامنځته کړي چې امریکایان چې دي دوی دهشتګرد دي، دوی د شپې په خلکو باندې حملې کوي، هغه سره ظلم شوي، هغه انتقام اخلي.
This is the US military's brand new $60 million detention center at Bagram Air Base in Afghanistan. It will replace the former notorious prison, a symbol of detainee abuse for Afghans following the death of 2 inmates in 2002.
The prisoners who will soon be moved here remain in legal limbo. They haven't been charged with any crime. No civilian lawyer has ever been allowed inside Bagram.
Abdul Raqib's case was one that is unfortunately very typical of the types of injustice that you see that are ongoing in Afghanistan right now. His story is an all too familiar one because there are literally hundreds of families of individuals who have come forward to complain that their sons are being held without legal justification by the United States government.
Wazir Mohammed is a Kabul taxi driver who disappeared into Bagram in April last year. He's now in Guantanamo Bay. He's not been charged with anything. His crime was to inquire after a friend, another taxi driver, who was arrested, and who has since been released. What makes this case so appalling is that this man is recognized by the present government as having resisted the Taliban. This is his brother, Taj Muhammad, a nurse. This is where he is now, Guantanamo Bay, where prisoners are shackled, trussed, and kept in cages 8 feet by 7 feet for up to 24 hours a day. The light is always on. Children and old men have been incarcerated. Amnesty International calls it a black hole, a violation of the most basic human rights. There are 9 British citizens here, including this man, Shafiq Rasool from the West Midlands, who was effectively kidnapped by the Americans 2 weeks after he'd arrived in Pakistan, where he has relatives. That was almost 2 years ago. Since then, his family has pleaded for help from the British government, but still, he's been charged with nothing.
America and Afghanistan are now allies against terror.
As the next step of the so-called Operation Enduring Freedom, the U.S. government installs Afghanistan's new president, former UNICAL consultant Hamid Karzai.
Chairman Hamid Karzai.
Three years later, despite promises made by the U.S. government of liberating and improving the country, the situation in Afghanistan is still as precarious as before.
We're trying to build the infrastructure within Afghanistan. We're trying to create the conditions that will enable security and prosperity to take hold in this country.
Well, you know, we should understand that only the first road, the Kabul-Kandahar highway, has been rebuilt in Afghanistan and was opened only in December 2003, which means that 2.5 years have passed since 9/11, over which very little work has been done.
Only, by the way, 24 to 25% of the population in Afghanistan have access to safe water, and about 12 to 13% of the population have access to adequate sanitation. And the needs include essential medicines and drugs, childhood diseases, tuberculosis, malnutrition, water and sanitation, and community health. But we are implementing the programs ourselves. This is not the case in other countries.
I think that it's clear one of the main reasons that America went into Afghanistan was to try and get Al-Qaeda dismantled, the organization which committed the 9/11 atrocity.
Really?
Well, you don't think so?
Well, how come Al-Qaeda put the heroin business out? They took all the poppy growers and stopped the production of heroin.
What would you have done?
Wait, now how much of that illegal heroin was propping up the international banks with laundered money, and when it dried up, the first recession happened? Well, now that we're back in there, we aligned with the poppy growers, and the heroin business is back up full swing again. I thought we fight a war on drugs here.
All right, Jesse,
Seems we're not.
Afghanistan is the world's largest supplier of opium, and since the US invasion in 2002, the growing of opium poppies has reached staggering proportions, with money from the British government being used by opium farmers to plant gigantic fields of poppies. The BBC confirmed in April 2004 that since the invasion and occupation of Afghanistan by British and American forces, poppy production has reached an all-time high.
Opium poppies, eradicated by the Taliban as part of their proclaimed moral order, have been reintroduced by the Northern Alliance warlords. In 2003, with a mighty 3/4 of the world production, Afghanistan has become the world's #1 producer of heroin.
All the warlords are deeply involved, either in selling or trafficking in opium oil, or actually in providing resources for farmers to grow it. The Americans have not done anything. Neither the coalition forces nor the NATO-led peacekeeping forces, and nor has President Karzai.
It was revealed in October of 2009 that the CIA had been funding puppet Afghani leader Hamid Karzai's warlord brother for the last 8 years. He is the lead opium dealer in the region. It seems the same cartel that was dealing drugs in the 80s and 90s never stopped. After all, how else could the government fund black operation programs across the board?
The Karzai regime has whole sections of it which are drug supported, and we can't touch it. We turned Afghanistan into the major supplier of heroin for the world. It happened under CIA supervision.
They control the legal and illegal drug trades, and in cases like the Iran-Contra scandal, the American government itself was caught supplying its country with cocaine.
Essentially, black operations were not only caught dealing arms illegally and supporting South American dictators, but also smuggling drugs into the United States.
Iran-Contra was really the merging of two different programs. The first one was support for the Contras, who were, let's face it, a force of terrorists in Nicaragua trying to overthrow the Sandinista government. They were being secretly supported by the CIA, and at the bottom of the whole thing was drugs.
Iran-Contra was openly exposed by massive network coverage.
How was it that in 3 years, a network Washington set up to run arms to the Contras wound up running cocaine into this country for the most vicious drug cartel in the world? At the same time, we were supposed to be fighting a war against drugs.
But by the same token, I also smuggle my share of weapons in exchange for those illegal substances, with the full knowledge and assistance of both the DEA and CIA.
Betzner says that in 1983, he flew weapons from Florida to El Salvador and drugs from Colombia to the Bahamas on the way back. In 1984, he says, he flew twice from Florida to Costa Rica and back.
We could bring back our own cargo, and they would arrange it, or we could bring back their cargo without ever having to worry about interception, arrest, anything like this, that everything was taken care of.
What kind of cargo were you talking about?
Drugs.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to 3 specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. I have been trying to get this out for 18 years, and I have the evidence.
If you have information about CIA illegal activity in drugs, you should immediately bring that information to wherever you want, but let me suggest 3 places. The Los Angeles Police Department,
For the record, my name is Mike Rupert, R-U-P-P-E-R-T. I did bring this information out 18 years ago, and I got shot at and forced out of LAPD because of it. I've been on the record for 18 years nonstop, and I'll be happy to give you, Congressman, anything that I have.
Thank you, Mr. Rupert.
The narrative on this war that we are fed from politicians and media presupposes positive intentions on the part of the United States and her allies. Yet the history of their foreign policy belies any sincerity or positive intent for others. They know only of their own selfish economic and political interests and are willing to destroy entire nations to achieve this. In the Muslim world in particular, Western foreign policy has been brutal and unrelenting. A mix of propping up dictators, establishing foreign entities, and displacing entire peoples, going to war based on lies, and pursuing policies designed to create and embed division and chaos. Hence, not only is the war in Afghanistan a costly, unjust, and oppressive failure, it is also being waged by those who have no regard for human beings, their lives, and livelihoods.